share my screen one more time, talk a little bit about NAWBO as we kick this off. Fun, fun, fun. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick off. We've got quite a few participants on already. I'm sure we will have more joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a bit about NAWBO. Before we get started, in case you are new to the National Association of Women Business Owners, my name is Felina Hansen, and I am the president of NAWBO San Diego. NAWBO is really a unified voice for women business owners across the country. We do host local, regional, and national events. In fact, we have a great event coming up on Wednesday of this week, a California conference called Propel, where we're connecting with our state legislators to really craft the laws that are needed to support women business owners. And that's how NAWBO was started back in 1974. They were the organization that was able to come together to ratify the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that allowed women, up until 1974, women could not get a business loan without a male co-signer, which is pretty crazy. So what I like to say is NAWBO is for you. If you'd like to have a positive effect on public policy decisions, but maybe you're not quite ready to run for office yet. So without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Liz Whitehead all the way from the East Coast. She is a member at HeraHub DC, and excited to have her expertise talking about this very big world of women-owned business certification. So Liz, I'm going to let you take it away, introduce yourself, tell us a little more about you. Go ahead and share your screen, and we'll dive in. I will say for folks as you're loading that up, yes, use the Q&A. I will be monitoring that as Liz goes through the webinar here. And we will pause and take questions if need be. If it's something that I see, can wait till the end, then we'll hang on to it. I promise we'll answer your questions. We have plenty of time. Liz is built in plenty of time for questions today. So I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A. Please use it. If you have any comments or questions, again, if you just came on, this is being recorded. So we will send a recording after this is done in case you missed part of it and you want to go back and review. So Liz, take it away. I'm going to throw myself on mute and let you go.
Thank you. Thanks, Felina. I'm going to get into a little bit more about me, but before we do that, because we are all virtual, I want you to think about the last time that you were at a conference. We need to think about in person, right? It feels like a lifetime ago. You're in person, there was maybe 200, 2,000, 10,000 people there. You got there the first day, you had a little anticipation, you had your coffee. Think about the business cards, think about everybody else's coffee breath, and if they're polite, they maybe have a little layer of mint over that coffee breath as they're talking to you. You're wearing your comfortable shoes because you made that mistake before when you tried to walk miles and miles of these conference halls in your high heels. And there's a buzz about the room, right? That's one of the things I think I miss most in the virtual is that buzz, that energy that's so hard to recreate when you're virtual. And then when you're done, you've made your connections, you've been really productive, sitting down at the end of the evening with your friends and discussing how it went, what went well, what could have gone better. That feeling when you have the business card of somebody you feel like is going to be a great lead for you, you can't wait to follow up with them. So that's a feeling I got. This picture is from the WeBank Summit and Salute, which is their awards event, which happens in March every year. It did not happen this year. And it's a whole conference dedicated to big organizations that want to buy from women-owned businesses. So companies like yours. And you might be thinking, well, why is now the time to talk about this? Because you didn't even have this conference this year. Well, I was recently at a conference, a virtual conference with a couple clients of mine. And at that conference, I actually went into the UPS booth. There was a virtual booth. I went into the UPS booth and talked to the people there and asked them what they were looking for. And it turns out that one of my clients have exactly what they were looking for. She can handle some third-party logistics and outsourcing for them. And they were like, that's a great connection. So I chatted with my client over the conference software and said, go talk to UPS. They're looking for someone like you. She did. They ended up having a half-hour conversation. And then later on in that same conference, on the give and get board, there was a list of things that people needed and a list of things that people could offer. One of the things that she could offer was PPE, because she does this sourcing and logistics. So even though we weren't in that traditional conference atmosphere, there's still opportunities for companies like yours to get in front of these decision makers and make those connections, either with other women business owners or the major purchasing organizations. And I'm going to get into the government a little bit later, but I wanted you to know that if you're thinking about, when should I do this? Should I be putting this off? I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why now is the time. So I wanted to set the stage with that. Now, when we talk about certification, this is often, even though I don't see people actually falling on their desks, this is what I imagine people do, right? You've heard that it's very time consuming, that there's a lot of paperwork, that it's very tedious. And it is, it can be. I know that paperwork is the entrepreneur's kryptonite. And so when we talk about certification, and that these opportunities I was talking about at that conference came about because my client was a certified women-owned business. People were like, ugh, I tried that and it didn't work for me, or the paperwork, or I've heard it's really expensive, that I need to pay someone to get it done and it's going to cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, it's not expensive. If someone has told you it's going to cost $20,000 in 5 years to get this done, that's not true. So we'll go into that, but it can be tedious. So what I want to do today is help you go through what you do need to do and make the decision, right? You might not make the decision to get certified today based on what I tell you, but I want you to at least be able to check it off your mental checklist. Okay, I know that certification's for me, or I know it's not for me. And then if you find out it is for you, some steps that you can take going forward. So who am I to talk about all this stuff? How should I know? Well, my background is with the organizations that certify women business owners. I work for WeBank, which stands for Women's Business Enterprise National Council. It is not a bank, but that's just how the acronym is pronounced. And there are regional affiliates in both New York and DC. And then my region went from Washington, DC to the world when I worked for WeConnect International, because these organizations do have a global focus as well. And I help women-owned businesses save time and money getting bigger clients, because I saw my clients just like the woman in the previous picture, right? They're stuck, they're spinning their wheels. They see their competitors really getting ahead in this space, but they don't know why it's not happening for them. So I started my company to help women business owners do that. I also do work with corporate clients to help them educate their suppliers about how to really make the most of this. So as I said, what I really want you to do is be able to take this off your mental checklist. I often talk to people who are like, I've been meaning to do that, or I've heard I should do that. So what we're going to do today is say, is it for you? And if so, what do you do next? We're going to cover the who, the what, the how, and the when. The who starts with you and your business, and then also your clients. We're going to talk about the what, so knowing the bottom line, why companies are doing this, and what is it exactly. And then how to identify your target market and know when to get help. So you're not one of those people that's stuck spinning their wheels. So this is going to be you at the end of it. And if you're like me, I mentioned to Felina at the beginning. So this woman, I was like, at first I thought this was a picture. I was like, okay, this is great. She's like relaxed and confident, but she's still in her suit. So you could either be this person, or you could be like me. This is where I am today. I'm at my lake house in Pennsylvania. So that's where we'll be later this evening. So We're going to start out kind of confused, not sure which way to go. At the end, you will feel calm, confident, and secure that you know what you're doing. And before we do that, I thought I had a slide in there, but I skipped it. I want to thank Belina for this opportunity to talk to you guys. NAWBO San Diego, which as she mentioned, is doing great work for women business owners. Julia Westfall from Hero Hub in DC, who is always looking for ways to promote her members and make sure that women business owners have the info they need. And Helena Carell, who's been sort of behind the scenes, making sure everything happens. So I want to make sure I thank all of those people and you for attending. So thanks for showing up. So the first thing we're talking about is the bottom line. I know that oftentimes people want to skip to the like, how do I do it? What's in it for me? How is it going to help my company? But I like to start with the bottom line so that you know why people want to buy from you. That's going to help you, should you decide to get certified, or even if you don't, understand how to talk to these people who are your clients and potential clients. So this is some corn that my husband got at the grocery store and he brought it home. He was super excited. I mean, it's summertime. We all love to eat corn in the summertime. It's more delicious now than it ever is. And I was at first, I was like, you need the farmer's market, you got it at the grocery store. And then he was like, no, look. And you can see right around here, the women-owned logo right there in the middle. He's like, look, it's a women-owned company. We bought women-owned at the grocery store. And I don't know if you all have seen those logos, but what that logo refers to is a company that is either WeBank certified or WeConnect certified. So while a lot of times we think about these certifications and procurement and supplier diversity, which I'll get into those terms a little later, we think about those as B2B only opportunities. But one of the things that Walmart, WeBank, and WeConnect International realized after a study Walmart did was that, one, consumers are mostly women, right? We know that 80% or more of consumer decisions are made by women. And Walmart actually conducted a study to understand if that would affect consumer purchasing decisions, knowing if something was women-owned. And the research showed a majority of their female customers would go out of their way to buy a product from women-owned businesses. They felt that it demonstrated quality. And in 2015, WeConnect and Walmart and WeBank came up with this logo, which designates a certified women-owned company. And I tell you that because that's just one of the reasons why these big purchasing organizations want to do business with you. Not because you're underrepresented in business, though you tend to be, it's depending on your industry, and we'll get into that in a second, but because there's actually a bottom line impact for them doing business with you. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about your customer and how you talk to them. I always tell my clients, don't lead with the fact that you're women-owned. That's not going to win you the business. When you saw me at the picture of that conference, being women-owned got me through the door of that conference. After that, it's only sales and your value proposition that's going to win you the business. So what are some of the other business case for doing business with women? And I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but again, just to let you know that what big purchasing organizations see when they see you is something that can elevate their brand. They look at your purchasing power. They want to see innovative ideas. You can bring a flexibility that a big organization can't always do because of the bureaucracy and the levels involved. You might flexibility on pricing. They expect great customer service, right? They're going to be usually they expect to deal with the CEO. And from a long-term perspective, there's a lot of community wealth building. We've saw with the Black Lives Matter movement that there was a big push toward buying from Black-owned companies, that during COVID-19, there was a huge push to buy from small and local businesses to help those companies survive. So long-term, yes, there is this community wealth building and business development, economic development programs. But at the bottom line, it comes down to your client's competitive advantage. That's why they want to do business with you. Not only that, but as women, you not only control the purse strings, like the purchasing power, but you also control trillions and trillions of dollars in personal wealth. So long-term, this is a good decision for these companies. So this is a catalog. I found a picture of a catalog to show you one of the opportunities that WeBank is providing for people that offer product-based companies. So as you know, in a lot of the corporations, their employees are working the same amount. They've had to work virtually. They've really had to flex, just as we have as entrepreneurs. And a lot of corporations reached out to WeBank and said, we want to send our employees gifts of recognition. We're going to send them an award or something like that to show how much we appreciate them. And we want it to come from WeBank certified companies. So they're getting together a catalog of companies that offer products that those companies will recognize, that they use to recognize their employees. And I point that out now because, again, I know from some of my clients are busier than ever, but some of my clients are like, you know, if your target industry was the hospitality industry or travel, you know, you might be really hurting right now. And I want to point out that there's still companies that are making an effort to buy from companies like yours. So to be a part of that catalog, you just have to be a WeBank certified business. Oop, skipped it. So just to review the first point, there's a business case for doing business with women. And when you know the business case, you can use the tools available to you. So as a product company, you can use the women-owned logo. You can use these terms, use this language of innovation, flexibility, competitive pricing in front of your clients. Now, I haven't touched on the government yet. We'll get there. And if you're a service-based company, you might be thinking, well, what about me? I see how that works for products, but what about me? So this is me talking to a group of people at the Freddie Mac Vendor Academy last June. And I'm a service-based company, and I worked with one of the large corporate companies. They hired me to educate their suppliers. But I also want to point out that the woman in this photo is one of my clients, and she actually built a relationship with Freddie Mac because she offers digital marketing and analytics, so market research and analytics. And this is exactly what their vendor academy was about. So they met the people from Freddie Mac. They knew about the vendor academy because I was like, I know they have a vendor academy. You should try and get in there. And once they got into the vendor academy, they got a whole new look at not only the supplier diversity program at Freddie Mac, but more than that, the people that are going to make the decisions about buying from them. The procurement people, the executives, the people in the marketing that would be able to see her products and solutions and say, that's something we need. So there's definitely an opportunity for service-based companies as well. So you've got to know who those target clients are that you're dealing with first. So I want to tell you the key, I mentioned this term earlier, and I have this down on notebook paper because if you are taking notes, great. I just want you to write down the term supplier diversity. Supplier diversity refers to corporate programs that are aimed toward buying from women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, LGBT-owned businesses, disability-owned businesses, or businesses owned by people with disabilities, and veteran-owned businesses. So there are people who are supplier diversity representatives within these companies whose job it is to count their spend, how much dollars they spend with you. Now, typically, you are not doing business, or the person who you have a relationship with, your client, and who's making the decision about the specs are not the supplier diversity people. The supplier diversity people are your advocates within the company. So it's a little bit different than a typical sales relationship, even a typical B2B relationship, because you're making them your advocate within the company. So an example of that, this is Inco International. Ingrid took one of my Diversity Masterminds classes. After she got certified, she was a fairly substantial translation company. She had some big clients, but she wanted to win new business. And she took our class, and in that class we said, what you should do first, before you think about targeting other clients, new clients, is go back to your existing clients and tell them that you are now a certified women-owned business. And she said, well, I don't think that people who are buying translation really care about that. I mean, I include my certificate and everything. And I said, well, what you have to do is reach out to the supplier diversity people. They are the people that do care, especially if you're already doing business with them. It's an easy ask. You just say, hey, I just wanted to make sure, keep you in the loop that we're doing that spend. And she said to us, she's like, it's not something I ever would have done otherwise. It seemed like a waste of time. But she called up the supplier diversity person who said, I'm so glad you called. We have a newsletter going out to the entire company, and I want to showcase your company and the work we're doing with you. They showcased her company next week in the newsletter. It went out to the entire company that, remember, she was already doing business with, and she actually was able to do business with a new department and ended up doubling her business with that company. So just by knowing who her current clients were and knowing supplier diversity and what their role was, she was able to catapult her progress in terms of leveraging her certification. So you might be thinking, well, how am I ever going to know that? How do I know if my clients or potential clients have supplier diversity programs? Well, this is, if you have that pen and paper, write this down. This is going to be just one action item. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of homework, just a little homework. Go to the WeBank website, and here it says corporate members. You'll click on that, and under that is a list of corporates. Are there corporations, when we're talking Fortune 1000 companies here, who want to do business with a company like mine? Are there companies that I'm already doing business with, or competitors of companies I'm already doing business with, right? People who are in the same industry. Can I showcase my past performance to those companies? So I want you to take a look at that list, and that'll be the first starting point of determining, okay, this certification is right for me, or I'm still not seeing if there's opportunities here. When you see someone on that list, what that tells you is that company has a supplier diversity program. Now, you might be doing business with a lot of Fortune 1000, with some Fortune 1000 companies, or even smaller, medium-sized companies that don't appear on this list. That may mean that supplier diversity, that they're still great clients. Obviously, you should still try and win their business, but that supplier diversity may not be a way in if they're not on that list. Okay, so what are the kinds of companies you're going to find on this list? This is a very busy slide, but I include it because it can be confusing. This slide is not so much to give you information, but just to tell you, here are a whole bunch of companies that accept these different certifications. Remember, I mentioned supplier diversity and the different groups. So there's women-owned small business, WeBank, which we talked about, NMSDC, which is the National Minority Supplier Development Council and certifies minority-owned businesses, and GLCC, which certifies LGBT-owned businesses, Disability In, which certifies disability-owned businesses, and NAWBO, which certifies veteran-owned businesses. And so these are the companies that you think about when you think, okay, these are the companies I need, these are the certifications that can work for me. And then on the government side. So, right, when you were signing up for this, they talked about the billions and billions of dollars that the government is spending with women-owned businesses. In fact, the government has a different method of doing this than the corporations. The government agencies have a mandate for doing 5% of their business with women-owned businesses, and as do their prime contractors. And oftentimes they'll look down even to their tier 2 contractors. So the people who do business with their primes. Now, looking at the bottom of this list, you can see IBM, Accenture, people that appeared on the previous list as well, because these are companies for whom the federal government is their biggest client. So whereas Booz Allen Hamilton is a private company, it's not government, it's not a government agency, their primary client is the government. So they're looking for people like you. So whereas I mentioned before, in corporate America, there's a real bottom line focus. In the government, it really is more compliance focused. With that also comes a different certifications that you can get. So 8A, women-owned small business. Remember, that appeared on the other list as well. economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, hub zone or historically underutilized business zone, or service disabled veteran-owned businesses. What's special about being a woman-owned business is, like I mentioned, those set-asides. So both 8A companies and 8A companies are any companies that have been disadvantaged in business. And you go through a whole different process with that. Women-owned small businesses meet the threshold for a small business as dictated by the SBA, or Small Business Administration. And they are 51% women-owned. So I want to go a little bit more into that because I feel like the corporate side is a little more straightforward. The government side, there's a little more acronyms and a little more things you need to know. So I actually have a chart for you so you can see the differences. And you might have to move around the little thumbnails if you have my thumbnail up there so you can see everything. So just to sort of recap what we went over, the clients, if your clients are government agencies and prime contractors, right? If you're selling airplane parts, if you're selling a cybersecurity solution that the Department of Defense buys, the government is your client. But they also, these government agencies operate like small cities. They buy pretty much everything, as do Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. The only thing that you wouldn't find that corporate companies buy, which is the same as government companies, is anything for defense, right? Their corporations aren't buying tanks and things like that. But if you're not selling tanks, then probably you could have a client in the government sector or the corporate sector.
Hey, Liz, I want to interject here if I can. We have
Sure.
a question from one of our attendees. And it's a question I know probably a good number of folks on the webinar have. So this is great. She has an accounting firm. And so her question is, currently her clients are mostly small business owners. Mm-hmm. So if you have any examples of, so a service-based company, you gave us an example of the analytics firm, but an accounting firm who typically is now focused on small business clients, how could they kind of look at this as potentially going after some of these opportunities?
Great. That's a great question. And we get into this a lot once people get certified, is that it actually goes beyond contracts and beyond networking, the opportunities that are available to you. So I know an accountant in Silver Spring, Maryland, who is a part of the network, and same thing. Her clientele is women-owned businesses, but small businesses. So she has dentist office, hair salons, things like that. So companies that would not be certified. But what she realized was, I really want to diversify my client base to get into the women-owned businesses. In her case, in DC, a lot of times the focus is federal government contractors, into the big contractors and the women-owned businesses that are growing and scaling. So when you look at, again, this is sort of when you look at not only your clients, but who their clients are, kind of like in the government sector, is that if you want to do business with small business owners that are growing and scaling, that are getting these $1 million contracts, then this is a good place to find them. So that's the first answer. And as someone who's a member of NAWBO and HeraHub, you already understand the importance of those networks. The other thing is, there's a lot of opportunities to work on your business, not just in your business, through these organizations. There's executive scholarship programs to places like Tuck or Kellogg. There's also opportunities through like Wells Fargo and IBM are running programs right now on how to pivot your business for growth and scale. So those are all opportunities available to you, as well as simply just finding the network of women business owners who you want to be your clients. So that would be my answer to that.
Got it. Great. Yeah. And we've got a few more questions I'll tackle. Sure. since we're, kind of tackling some questions.
Absolutely.
I do want to say, Jody, just to you specifically, and Liz, you can totally disagree with me on this. Totally fine. but this isn't for everybody, frankly.
Right.
you
Right.
know, this is just my opinion. I mean, I serve women-owned businesses, very, small businesses. I'm not going to pursue this certification. It's just, I'm not looking to, gain Wells Fargo as a customer. They're not my target market. So, part of this discussion is as much to know, as Liz said in the beginning, is this even right for me? Should I pursue this? Because it absolutely isn't for everybody. So I'm going to ask a couple others. Nina has a question. What if I want to get a woman-owned small business LGBT? Do we have to, maybe I'm not reading that correctly, but do we have to get individual certifications? I see the government certification for women-owned business and small business as one, the women-owned small business. Thanks. So let me read this one more time to make sure I've got it right.
Okay.
What if I want to get a women-owned small, so maybe she's asking about, does that cover being an LGBT business? Like, how does that play into this as far as certifications?
That's a great question. And I'm going to go back to that because this is probably the most confusing part. So the government currently doesn't look for LGBT owned businesses. You would qualify under a woman-owned small business, assuming you met the other criteria, but they're not looking for LGBT. The NGLCC would be the certification you would look for on the corporate side to get both. Or you could get the WeBank certification, and that certification is good for the women-owned small business certification. And I'll get sort of into the mechanism for that.
Okay, perfect. We'll tackle a few more questions here, and then I'll let you keep moving on because I know some of this you're going to get to. So similar question from Lynn Butler. Would it be beneficial to companies that offer coaching services? And my guess would be potentially, right? Do you have any examples of that, folks you've worked with?
So potentially, I think probably the biggest example I have of that is there's a woman and she's in Southern California named Allison Maslin, who has the Pinnacle Network Group. Yep. And she was asked to speak at a WeBank regional organization. And from there, she was like, whoa, this is my target market, women who are looking to grow and scale. And so she actually developed relationships with a lot of the regional partner organizations and is now hosting a WeBank podcast. I see a lot of leadership coaches, a lot of management consulting and things like that are doing that, again, for the women-owned network. But Felina, as you said, I am not a certification evangelist, and you've got to figure out if it's the right fit for you and where you really want to put your time, energy, and resources. A lot of people, I've talked to people who are like, I just don't feel comfortable. These women are looking to buy from these big companies. I don't feel comfortable trying to sell to them at the same time. Whereas my feeling on it is that if they win this business, they're going to need you, and they might need you to win this business. So that, I think by, again, that gets into sales in a whole different webinar, but if you are able to frame it correctly and really find out where their pain points are, I think there's a lot of opportunities in this network.
Okay, that makes sense. The networking within, so to speak, to some extent. Okay, great. And then Beppy had a similar question, 1 to 2 employees, service industry. I think we've kind of answered that. There is potential there. It really depends.
Right.
Okay, so let's keep going here. I'll let you keep going. We've got a couple more questions, but we'll circle back around as we get a few more questions. And great, you guys are doing awesome. Please keep the questions coming, and we will tackle them.
Yeah, I told Felina I want to give the people what they want. So direct me in whatever way you want to go. And we'll come to a break before the next session, and I'll see what questions we have. So I mentioned SBA size standards, and this is when we get to I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's very wonky, but I do have a resource for you So you can really see, do I fit the standards? But the SBA really has a great tool for you to figure this out. Do I qualify as a small business for government contracting purposes? Now, this is going to depend on your industry. There's different size standards for the different industries we talked about, like accounting versus consulting and leadership coaching. So I use my own company as an example for this. It's 3 steps. You go, what's your industry? And you find what's called your North American Industry Classification Code, or your NAICS code. Remember that word, because that's going to come up again. And then you put it in and they say, this is your small business size standard. As long as I make less than $11 million in annual revenue, then I qualify for government contracting. Now, this is qualifying for government contracting in terms of small business. To get the women-owned set aside, there are, again, a narrowing of industries that meet that qualification. And what a set aside is, and how it's different than the corporate sector, is that there's actually business that government can say, you know what, we don't have to put this out for bid. We can do a sole source or a set aside for women-owned small businesses only. So it basically, what it does is it narrows down your competition. So that's where we are with women-owned small businesses. This is where the size standards are. And if you're interested in that, I'm also going to direct you to certify.sba.gov for those eligibility requirements. And that'll tell you, okay, do I qualify? And they'll go through the whole thing. It really is a beautiful tool. I know a lot of entrepreneurs don't believe me when I say that about a government agency, but it really is lovely. The website really works. And it just takes you through, like, do I qualify for 8A? Do I qualify for women-owned small business? Do I qualify for economically disadvantaged women-owned small business? And takes you through that whole process. So that's a really good place to start. And you'll start to get acquainted with these terms like NAICS codes, like your Dun & Bradstreet number. And those are things that you'll use for, if you pursue any of this kind of business with big companies, you'll need to know that. So just reviewing, remember, you're going to go to the webank.org website and see if any of your target clients or corporate clients have supplier diversity programs, right? For those of you who have smaller businesses, you might say, you know what, this is way too big. It's way too much now. It's not something I need to pursue at this moment. And, you know, I'm getting a lot of these connections through HeraHub or through NAWBO. You know, that might be a perfectly good answer. If you see that there are clients or potential clients for you, then at webank.org, that's where you actually start the application, and we'll get to that in a second. And then, as I mentioned, certify.sba.gov. One thing to keep in mind about certify.sba.gov is that as of July 15th, those rules, there was a new rule that actually changed. So it used to be that you could self-certify as a women-owned business, or you could go to the third-party certifier and get a certification. WeBank is one of those third-party certifiers. So it used to be, it could be like, okay, I'm getting certified through WeBank. I'm also going to get my women-owned small business certification at the same time. At this point, you can still do that, but you have to go through an additional step at certified.sba.gov to make sure you upload that certificate there and say you've already gotten the third-party certification. SBA is just doing things a little differently. They want to make sure that there's no fraud in the system, which is why there's this whole tedious process to begin with, which we'll get into next. But before we do that, any questions?
Let's go ahead and take a few more of these. A lot of them, you know, tend to be on the same vein, but slightly different angles. So I just want to make sure I'm really addressing everyone's questions fully. So Farheen asked, do companies only look for an official certification, or would they consider just the fact that, you know, inherently you are a women-owned business? So I'm sure you get this question a lot of like, why do I have to get the certification?
Yeah, and that's exact. Thank you so much. You're setting me up for the next step.
Perfect.
Which is that why do they require all this paperwork? So having worked in the organization, I would say that about 7% of people are denied for certification. So I'll start with that. And of those, probably half or a little more than half, it's actually a technicality in their paperwork. They have a male partner, and it's an LLC, and someone drew up their documents real fast because they're entrepreneurs, right? And they're not going over everything with a fine-tooth comb. And that turns out that you can only make decisions by unanimous consent in this LLC. And so that's not going to meet the criteria for certification, right? But out of all of those, there is a small percentage of people who would try and take advantage of the company either as a pass-through, like, oh, I'll just put my sister in charge of this company, and then our mail-on company can win all the business. And certainly that's what SBA is responding to now. It's something WeBank is known for a long time. I worked at WeConnect International in the international development space. They called it mail contagion, which is that that when there was preferred rates for women-owned businesses, then all of a sudden these women-owned businesses popped out of the ether. They didn't exist before. And usually it was mail-on companies propping them up. So it's really just to make sure that the standards are stringent. And when you're looking at the federal government or these corporations or states and cities, every month there's a state or a city that comes out and says, we gave this company a $2 million or $20 million contract, and it turns out it was a minority-owned company. So that's everything that these corporations, that these agencies are trying to do in terms of their brand, their economic development, everything we talked about in terms of the business case is wiped away when there's someone that works the program. So if it's a supplier diversity program, they're going to want to see a certification typically, which again, if you're working with other women business owners, they might not think that.
Got it.
All right.
Perfect. Okay. One thing I want to clarify before we move on, there's a couple questions again that like Angela asked, I know this can be intensive and time consuming, and so we'll definitely get into that. Julie Hansen had asked, I just want to make sure that I'm telling her the right info.
Yeah.
On the WeBank website, the link to find those companies that are what I think is called corporate members. Was that
yes.
the link? Okay. And then will you describe what that will get somebody just once more to make sure I'm articulating it totally
Sure.
correct?
Oh, sure. What you're going to get there, and this is again where I should clarify, there's a lot of terminology that we just throw out there. When we say corporate members in the supplier diversity space, that means the corporations that are looking to buy from certified diverse businesses. So you might think, but my company's incorporated, I'm a corporation. What we're talking about there is these Fortune 1000 companies. And so when you go to the WeBank website and look at corporate members, what you're going to see is a list of companies that not only recognize your certification, but are also have a supplier diversity program such that they're putting money into WeBank. They're paying WeBank to say, please, I want to find women-owned businesses. So they just have that additional level of skin in the game. I'll give you a little inside baseball. This is something we say when people are already certified, but you actually, in the process of getting certified, you fill out your application. Then once you're certified, that application becomes your profile in the database. So the corporations can all search you. Not only that, but once you're certified, you're actually able to find the contact information for all of those corporate members that want to do business with you. My other little tip is that's usually only 60% accurate at any given time, but it's a great place to start.
All right, perfect. Awesome. Well, let's keep going here and I'll keep track. I've got some questions coming through the chat as well as the Q&A. I'll ask folks to just put them in the Q&A if possible. It's a little easier for me to keep track over there.
You're doing great. Okay, so this is when I was going to do my time check and see where we are, and I think we are great on time. So I have plenty of time and would love to answer all your questions. Also, it's a good reminder of why do I keep saying now is the time to do it, right? Like, why should I do it now? Maybe I'll wait. How to do it and how to get the help you need. So time is money. We all know as business owners that time is money. And I think back to a woman that I met. She talked to me and she's like, I need your help. I've had this piece of paper, which was at WeBank .org, you'll also get like a list of paperwork that you need to submit as part of your file. That's where we get into the tedious part. She's like, I've had this piece of paper with this checklist on my desk for 2 months. So if you just, all the time it takes to move that piece of paper around, to put it in a file, to be like, put it on your bulletin board, to I'll get back to it, just make the decision now. I'm going to get certified or I'm not going to get certified. If you do make the decision, I think the biggest thing that people, and not only that, but you're taking it off your mental checklist, right? Of the things keeping you up at night, this should not be one of them. You have a lot more other things to worry about. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Let's just put it off, take it off the mental checklist. So once people do decide to get certified, I think either within the government sector or in the WeBank sector, is that these are, you know, it's a government agency, it's a nonprofit organization, it's that utilizes a network of other organizations to actually process these things. Everything doesn't happen immediately. And so I meet a lot of people who are like, I went through, I thought I answered all the questions, but I made a mistake, and then I just put it aside and never got back to it, right? Which again is fine. And there's, you know, there can be a whole other discussion about the user friendliness of these sites and that kind of thing. And hey, if you have that kind of solution, let's, you know, let's get that get certified so we can talk about it. But I think the main thing is that when you know, one of the biggest things when WeBank offered the SBA certification, or the Women-Owned Small Business certification, is that you had to go into sam.gov, which is the System Administrative Management for the government. You had to actually get a screenshot that showed you were active and upload that to your file. And then they could certify you as a woman-owned small business. Well, what I did initially, and remember, I used to work for these organizations and actually process these applications. So I read it and I was like, okay, well, I'll just upload when I got my approval from sam.gov, I actually got a PDF. So I'm just going to upload that and send it to them. That was not right. They needed a screenshot of, right? It sounds so much wonkier. Like, why can't I just send my approval letter? For whatever reason, it didn't work. And I say that to say, even though something is correct or legal, doesn't mean it's the right way to do it for this process. And so I tell people, if you are 100% women-owned, you don't have any male partners, if you don't have any of your ownership of your company in trust or in a holding company or any subsidiaries, if you're not a franchise, then you can probably get this done in 4 hours to 8 hours. So a half a day to a day. You can do it yourself. There's nothing complicated about your ownership. If you do have a male partner, I know in California, that a lot of people have ownership of their company in trust for different reasons, that if you have that situation, you could have your lawyer tell you this is a perfectly legal way to operate. And that lawyer, she would be correct. But that doesn't mean you're going to meet the criteria for certification. And that is frustrating, those layers of, you know, bureaucracy or paperwork, or again, the entrepreneur's kryptonite. So I would say if you don't meet those criteria, it might behoove you to at least have a conversation with someone who can lead you through it. And I'm happy to have those conversations. I actually don't process the applications myself. I don't do that for people, but I do have a business partner that does. So, you know, if we talk, I'm like, oh yeah, you need to get help with it, I would direct you to her. But oftentimes I talk to people, I'm like, it's just paperwork. Put it on your calendar, set aside hours, and just get it done. So what is the actual process? There's the online application, and you will actually upload. It used to be that you have to print everything out and send it in. Now you just upload a lot of documents to that application process. This is where I also get a question where people are like, if I haven't been in business for 3 years, they're asking me for my personal tax returns. Is there any way around? No, you will be uploading a lot of sensitive documents to this database. I will say, again, as someone who's worked in the organizations for a long time, only one other person ever sees that. That's the person processing your file. They're the only people who see all of this documentation together. They may say, that person might say, oh, I have a question, like this ownership agreement or this partnership agreement is really complicated. I might need one of our lawyers on our certification committee to look at that. Or I might need an accountant to take a look at these tax returns because there's a holding company and all of this stuff. So you might have someone look at pieces. There's only one person that's going to see your complete file. And of the people on the certification committee who see your file, they've all signed confidentiality agreements. And in my 2 decades of experience doing this, I've never seen anyone divulge that information in a malignant way. And if anything, we go overboard on the anonymity and confidentiality of that. So, to the point where some people might get certified because they're like, well, I didn't feel like it was my place to say, I actually know that's not a woman-owned business. I actually know that a male runs it. So, if anything, people would slip in that way. But that's why you apply online. You upload all of those documents and then you pay a fee. The fee is anywhere between, I think the lowest is $350 depending on your annual revenue. And the highest is, I think, $2,000 or $2,500. It depends on, again, the size of your business and where you're located. Your certification will be processed by a regional organization and they determine the fees. And then you have a site visit. Right now, all the site visits are virtual, but someone will actually interview you to make sure that you know what's going on in your company. Again, if all those other things being equal, I'm sure everyone on this call would meet the criteria, but they like to do that. One, it's an added layer of security and stringency that someone's not getting through just on the paperwork, but then it's also your introduction to the organization. So if you do decide to get certified, have all these questions available for them and really use that as an opportunity to build a relationship with that person that comes to visit you, because they're an advocate for you as well.
Liz, I'm gonna hit the proverbial pause button here and ask a question. I know a couple of our members recently at HeraHub have gone through this process and did the site visit. And one in particular, Natalia mentioned the site visit was pretty low key. It was, it was virtual and she was expecting to have show them around the space and we were all prepared and basically, she never left the conference room. How important is it, speaking of addresses, that you have, what type of business address do you need? Is it helpful to have, a co-working space as an address as opposed to your home or a PO box? Do they care about that?
That's a great question. It can't be a PO box. So you can put in a PO box, but they're going to need a physical mailing address, again, for the site visit purposes. But a co-working space is fine. That's no problem. A home-based business is fine. They go to plenty of homes. Basically, you want it to be where your documents are, should they say, can I see a signed contract or things like that. Now, what we've realized is, again, this process started 20 years ago. So you could actually, you had to see the documents physically, really. But now, it doesn't matter where you are. You're like, I can pull up that contract and that kind of thing. But you want to be, typically you're working. I went to a home-based business where there were 20 employees in this woman's home in the basement, in a lovely space, I should say. They weren't all like crammed in there either. It was wonderful. I was like, wow, this is the biggest company I've ever seen in a home-based business. But so really anything is fine, and you can put a PO box, but they're going to want to see a physical address as well.
Got it. Okay, perfect. I'll let you keep going here. We've got some more questions to tackle, but I'll let you keep pushing on here and we'll make sure to get to those.
I love it. I love it. So I wanted to give you guys a resource because I know a lot of people are like, I feel like I had it, but it didn't respond exactly to what my issue is. So I have a certification decisions guide that you can kind of skip around where you're like, do you meet the small business certification? No. Okay, here are the certifications that could be for you. And I include the NGLCC and NMSCC as well. So if you text roadmap to 55444 on your phone, you'll have to input your email, and then you'll get that guide, which is kind of a choose your own adventure to certification. So that gives you a little more, control over, okay, this is my company, this isn't my company. So I wanted to give everybody that resource and give you guys an opportunity. If we don't get to your question for some reason, if it gets to be 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'm probably going to have to sign off. So go ahead and put that in there so you can get your questions. Okay, so this is when I talk about who should do it themselves. I kind of mentioned that. It's also, if you're a really organized person, you can get this done. And what I always like to tell people is you should look at this as if you're filling out like a college application or an RFP. You want it to be as detailed as possible. You want it to look good. You want there to be grammar where there should be grammar, keywords where there should be keywords. And if all of that is starting to make you feel like you just want to put your head on your keyboard, like the woman in the first slide, then it might be a time to get help. And the reason I say that is because you're going to have to recertify every year. That there's not that much documentation in the years to follow, but you're also going to fill out portals for each of the supplier diversity targets you have. Once you get certified, they all have their own supplier diversity portal. Capital One just redid theirs. And so you want to have this information handy, like your NAICS codes, like your Dun & Bradstreet number. And you want to keep it all in one spot so that, okay, this company is asking for this, I can put this here, and this company is asking for that. Not only that, but as I mentioned, your certification becomes your profile in the database. So when corporations are searching for an accountant in San Diego or a speaker for their event, they're going to that database and they're going to see exactly what you put in there for that application. More than likely, people say, do corporations really use the portal? If they don't use it themselves, I know many of them do, but if they don't, then the regional partner organization does it for them. When I worked at WPEODC, our corporate partners would say, Liz, who do you know that does X? And so I was searching the portals, and I had to be really conscious, even if I knew, to the point of the woman who's like, I'm a woman-owned business, why do I have to do this? Even if I knew that you were really good, that you were a $25 million owned business and that you could really handle their work, I couldn't send over a shoddy profile. So what I would do is say, hey, fix this up, let's get this fixed up and let's get this sent over. But the organization has grown a lot. It depends on who's there. So you can't rest on the fact that you're going to get that kind of service. Better to just do it beautifully the first time. So if this picture makes you feel very calm and orderly, and that feels like your office, then that's probably something you should do yourself. If this gives you angina and makes you just want to get out and mess up all those binders, you might need some help doing your certification. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be your virtual assistant. It could be someone who really loves this stuff in your office. Your admin assistant could be great at this. So just think about that.
Perfect. Awesome. Liz, are we at a good pause point to take some more questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Let's do it. And I'll just repeat what I heard you say, which is this isn't you do it once and you forget about it, right? It's, again, ongoing updates, but also I'm sure there's a fair bit of marketing that goes into, it's like, okay, I got the certification. Now what? Now I've got to really, market this. So, all right, so let's see where we are at on questions. Angela had a question I think we covered. So last time I looked, very time intensive. So we talked about that. So I think we are good there, unless you have anything else to add. It looks like Carly, if you could answer this now. Do we need to be women-owned certified with WeBank or otherwise involved with WeBank to apply for the It's something pitch. Well, no pitch. Saw this opportunity on the website.
Did you see it on the WeBank website?
Must be, perhaps. Carly, if you want to clarify, you can jump in the Q&A again. Wellno, WELNNO pitch.
Yeah, it depends. If it was on the WeBank website, you probably have to be WeBank certified.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll save this. I'll just make a note here. We'll double check, and then we can get back to Carly.
Great.
On that in
Great.
particular. Okay.
Excellent.
Sorry, anything else to add to that, or?
No, I mean, that's a good example of one of the other opportunities that are available beyond just the networking. There's been a lot of virtual pitching, and GLCC has what they call Sip and Pitch Fridays. And at the Disability In conference, they had a pitch competition. So there's a lot of ways to get exposure and visibility right now in front of, again, these big corporate clients, but then also other women business owners that might be your customers.
Got it. Perfect. Another question from Fong. We answered this, but I'll just repeat. For the purpose of financial planning, can you give me an estimate of how much it will cost a small company to have the certification and how long the process is? So you definitely covered that. I think you said, was it somewhere between 500 and 2,500? Is that what you said?
About that.
Okay.
There's also the, depending on where you are, 350, I think is the smallest.
Okay, and that's interesting. I didn't know it depended on the size of business and where you're located. And so that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Great.
All right. And Jody asked another question. And would you have access to the list of other certified women-owned businesses? Again, keeping in mind that this is my target, not the big companies. And I think we answered that as well. You gave Allison Maslin as an example. She went this route just to network, essentially.
Well, to network, and through the directory, you do have access to the list of other women-owned businesses as well. So you do have access to that list. You can't download the list. So it's a little bit wonkier from that perspective. Like with the corporate members, you download an Excel spreadsheet, you got everybody's info. With the women-owned businesses, it's not that easy, but you do have email addresses and things like that. So if you meet someone and you're like, oh, I met Liz at that event, and I know she does this, but I can't remember, I didn't get her card or whatever, you can find that info.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. And we answered Angela's question about how much it costs. I'll just add on to that question that annual kind of recertification, is there an ongoing fee for that as well?
Yes, and it's the same fee every year.
Oh, okay. Okay, so somewhere between 350 and 2,500. Okay,
right,
got it.
And keep in mind, I didn't. I think I glossed over this in the government and corporate side. And on the government side, you need to be a small business. On the corporate side, you do not. For the corporate members on the WeBank side. So there are billion-dollar companies that are certified women-owned businesses in the network. And so when they're looking at charging fees, those high end of the fees are for those higher, bigger companies. If you are making less than $1 million in sales, you're going to fall on the lower end of those fees. But that's another thing I like to say, which is that you're not going to size out of the WeBank requirements. So for growth and scale, it's not a bad place to be.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Ashley had a question going back to if we're 100% solo owned, but are a franchise and have an S Corp, what's the catch with that? Did you say the paperwork was just a bit more complex?
They're going to look at your franchise agreement. And unless you know that, and I would have someone look at that in advance, just so you don't pay the fee and, submit something incorrectly. You don't have a lot of control over the franchise agreement, but talking to the regional partner organization in advance to be like, I don't know what your franchise is, but let's just say it's Jamba Juice. Are there other certified Jamba Juices? Or is the agreement very strict on this one thing that the criteria does like. For example, there are several hotel chains where their franchisees can get certified. And it's really like, are you they ask stuff about being in charge of your accounts receivable and things like that. So I would recommend actually getting in touch with the people who are going to certify you first, just to ask those questions about your particular franchise.
Perfect. Awesome. Nina asked a question. I see on the site that you have to have a minimum net worth and adjusted gross. I'm thinking she's saying profit. Is that just for the disadvantaged application? Is there a minimum profit per year for regular women-owned small business submissions?
I think that's a maximum net worth that she's looking at, not a minimum.
Okay.
For the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, yes, you do there's a maximum net worth, and you have a maximum of $6 million in assets, a maximum net worth, I think, of $750,000. So it's a maximum, not a minimum. For WeBank, there is no maximum or minimum.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. Few more questions here. I'm pulling off the Q&A and I'll go back over to the chat in a sec. Susie said, is there an annual fee to renew? One-time fee, we covered that. The follow-up question though, she did ask, I want to make sure we cover, do you get approval before you pay? It sounds like that was a no. You got to pay and then you figure it out.
Yep. It's non-refundable.
Okay. All right. Well, that is good to know. All right. Maureen asked, I've heard that SAMS, that government database, was being replaced. Is that correct? Would that mean that we should wait to register in the SAMS database?
I think it's being updated. I'm not sure it's being replaced so much as it's not your last stop. And I could be wrong about this because with a lot of this stuff, it does change a lot. So the latest information I got was from the certification director at WeBank, who acknowledged that things might be changing. But my understanding is you still have to register at SAMS, at sam.gov, and then you use that information. That's how you get your CAGE code. That's how you're verified by the IRS. And then you use that information when you go to certify.sba.gov. So it's actually an additional step rather than replacing. But I could be wrong about that because I haven't actually done it yet.
Okay, perfect.
And it just happened on July 15th, so.
Okay. Yeah, Carly did clarify that it's on the website and it's the pitch. Sorry,
yes.
My eyes might be crossing here.
Well, yeah, it's a weird word. Again, there's a lot of we this and we that for women enterprises. Yes, the pitch, you have to be a certified company.
Got it. Okay, perfect. My eyesight's going here. Elizabeth asked, what about corporate wellness programs, youth fitness programs, etc., or any of these types of opportunities that might be available on a federal contract? Corporate wellness programs.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the federal agencies and their prime contractors are doing that. I know of one company that was working with the Department of State on that. So it was working internationally with corporate wellness. So there's definitely an opportunity there.
Perfect. Okay, great. Christine Flora asked, is there a time frame for a certification, or certification is valid? Okay, I think we answered this. It's annual basically. Yep. And then you recertify every year. Yep, we got that. Farheen had another question here. How do the companies typically choose from among all the certified women-owned business owners who will be their vendor? So let's go back to this process. There's the database. You mentioned that sometimes a company will just kind of reach out to the local partner and say, who should I be looking at? Any other light you can shed on the process that companies?
Yeah, and I would say that's a whole different webinar, series of
Okay.
webinars. In fact,
Yeah.
I teach an 8-part class on that.
Okay.
But I will say that, you know, just the Cliff's notes of that is you have to have a really strong differentiator. I was talking to a company today who's in promotional products, and she's like, I'm friends with all the supplier diversity people. They know me, they've known me for years, but I feel really stuck. And what we landed on was that you really have to differentiate yourself, especially in an industry which has a lot of women business owners that have promotional products companies, and they're all certified and talking to the same supplier diversity people. You really have to stand out. And so what we landed on was that sustainability is really her niche, but she had to communicate that value even better. So the other thing I would say, so differentiate yourself is one thing. And then the other thing is it takes time. I talked to a speaker, so a leadership coach and speaker who's been very successful in the network. She spoke to the board about, you know, board leadership, which is great exposure because the board of WeBank is all of those corporations. She was sponsored by one of the sponsors of the conference to speak to the conference. And we were talking, and she said, the thing about this is people don't realize you need 30 touch points before you make a sale. She's like, most of the small business owners stop at 2. So sticking it in there, not giving up, being patiently persistent or persistently patient.
Yeah, makes sense. And Angela had kind of, again, along these terms or along these lines, a follow-up question. The listings, obviously on the WeBank, I always try to say that wrong, website. But what I'm hearing you say in addition to that is, you know, again, it goes back to marketing yourself to these companies directly, not just, you know, having a good listing and hope you get found. And it sounds like, unfortunately, right now, no one's having in-life conferences, as you opened up this session with, but doing some things virtually. It sounds like, and I've heard from other folks, that networking, going to events, going to conferences, showing up is just so important once you have the certification.
It's critical. You have to show up, you have to be there. And especially at the beginning, it does have to be you. I mean, I say all the time that, you know, male business development people are welcome in this network, but at some point they're going to want to see you as the founder so they know you. And again, you have to have the time, energy, and resources to do that. Right now, it's more important than ever, but there's so many great things happening right now. And because there is this focus during COVID-19 on supporting small businesses, a lot of the stuff is free. A lot of the conferences are reduced costs. And as I can see, the people on this webinar are making the most of things, right? You're in the chat, you're in the questions, you're asking questions. That's something that's harder, I think, during a live event. You can't just pop in the middle and ask your question, or even introduce yourself to other people in the chat and say, actually, I have a really good resource for you. Here's my LinkedIn, right? So there are ways to do it. As I mentioned, you know, I talked to the people from UPS at their booth, and was able to make a connection for a client there. But it's really just being comfortable and utilizing the tools, and and knowing where you want to spend your time. Do you have the time to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important consideration. Josiah asked, he has to go soon. How long will this webinar go? So we are scheduled for another 15 minutes for Q&A if folks want to hang on and ask more questions, or if, Liz, you have more to cover. But you will get an email of this recording if you registered for this event. And we also stream this via Facebook Live to the NAWBO San Diego Facebook page as well. So you can go back and review it there and share it there as well with other folks. If you think somebody would appreciate the information, feel free to share it. All right, I see Barbara sent me a chat. Is the certification appropriate for a startup or very early stage company, Liz?
Great question.
Yeah.
For a startup, so very early stage company, I would say probably not. The only benefit to doing it then is that the paperwork is so easy because you don't have much. But I would say a startup, unless it's very specific what you're doing. So for example, there is a startup in the network that's been pretty successful with visibility called Ant Flow. You guys might have heard of them. She provides free tampons in corporate bathrooms. And she pivoted during COVID-19 to providing PPE and masks and things like that. And she's a startup, but she's been very successful in the network by taking advantage of these pitch competitions because startup founders are always pitching. So she's really good at the pitching. She always wins the competitions. I think she actually won the last one or was one of the finalists. So she does a great job. For most startups though, I would say, one, it's again, the time, energy, and resources. You really want to spend your time on product market fit, pricing, getting that hockey stick growth. And they're really going to look at your capabilities and your traction. So if you don't have traction, that's going to be tougher. The other thing with startups is for this, you have to have 51% women owned. If you're fundraising and you're fundraising from people that aren't certified women-owned companies or certified funds, then that's going to dilute not only your ownership, but maybe your ownership, because you might be able to retain 51%, but definitely your control if you have these board members and things coming on. So you just want to think about that. It's definitely not a deal breaker by any means, and there are startups in the network, but something you want to think about: am I going to get all these contacts on the basis of being women-owned, and then that's going to be diluted by my fundraising? And
that's a really important distinction and something I would have never even thought of. Okay, yeah, so Barbara just commented on that. A good point about the future investment. She did ask specifically, we'll just take something specific. So the product that she's looking at for this is in the baby space. The target customer specifically is she wants to get into Walmart with this product. So maybe, if you can sort of flesh out pros and cons, if she knows exactly she wants to go to Walmart, what are the pros and cons to going through this whole process versus just going direct?
There are a couple of pros and cons. I mentioned the women-owned logo at the beginning. There's also a women-owned directory, which is, e-commerce is where it's at right now. And WeBank is using that women-owned directory to really promote their women-owned businesses. So there's that. Also, this is unrelated to certification, but it is related to small businesses that are manufacturing in the US. Walmart has an open call for new products right now. So definitely check that out. Felina, I can send that to you afterwards, and maybe you can just put it on Facebook or something so people can see that. Do you have
Barbara's a member at Hera Hub DC. So
yeah, great.
Yep.
So there you go. Yeah. So I'm happy to share that information. I'm also going to share my email address. You can see my website is down there at 12.5.com. My email address is liz@12.5.com. So definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to send that info. And again, that's the open call is unrelated to the certification. But I will say that what it does is you'll have this advocate working for you. Walmart is not an easy company to work with as a small business. And so I would say the way you're going to get in is because your product is something they need. You have good product market fit. Your pricing is right for Walmart. Your distribution is good. But once you're in, or in the process of getting in, negotiating terms, understanding their supplier gateway, which is very complex, understanding the way they buy and how that works, having an advocate on your side would be really beneficial. So I think in your case, and not only that, even before you get into Walmart, you'll have all this opportunity for visibility through the women-owned directory and that group. So, I would consider it.
All right. My light just fell over.
It's for the blooper reel.
I know, exactly. Love it. Okay. Any other questions here? I don't see anything coming through the chat. We still have quite a few folks
Great.
on.
Well, I have a couple more things I can
Perfect.
wrap up with while people think of their questions.
Perfect.
So Oceana Wines, this is one of my clients. They are, so just to tell you about a little bit what it's like to work with me, I mentioned a class for people who are already certified to really leverage their certification. Rachel Martin from Oceana Wines took that class. But then I also work with clients one-on-one to make sure they, once, because I know a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, okay, I got it, let's go. Some people are going to be like, okay, now I know what it entails and I know that I want to pay someone else to do it, right? So I offered those two services in terms of leveraging your certification. And Rachel was actually looking for someone to tell her brand story. So I was able to connect her with one of my one-on-one clients who she hadn't met through the course. And as a result of that, she has this, when she was reaching out to WeBank to be included in the catalog that I mentioned earlier of women-owned businesses, she was like, well, what I thought about was I could do just half bottles of wine as recognition for those employees. She's like, she doesn't do promotional products. She sells wholesale. She sells to restaurants and hotels, which are closed right now, or certainly not operating at the same capacity. So she said, oh, I can do this. And it wasn't, and while I clued her into the opportunity, she wouldn't have even thought it was for her, except that she had a network effect with the other women business owners who was like, have you thought about selling your product this way? Have you thought about telling your story that way? And so I say that to say for all the people who are like, is it for me? Is it not for me? I don't really sell to big companies yet, that this is an example of how that network effect can really come together outside of just, I'm doing business to get these contracts from the big companies. And so, definitely ask more questions as we have a little more time, but I want you all to mark your calendar for August 10th, which is 2 weeks from now. And if you're still on the fence about certification, I want you to make a decision about certification by August 10th. I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it, because I just want it to be off your mental checklist. Again, not something you should be losing sleep about. If you do decide you want to get certified, if after this you're like, oh, this is for me, I want to sell those baby items to Walmart, I need to get certified, then I'm going to give you to the 10th to submit that application, right? I told you if you didn't need help, you should be able to do it in 4 hours to 8 hours. So you have till the 10th to do it. And if you don't, then you're going to get in touch with me and I'm going to connect you with my business partner, Heather Cox, who will help you through the process. Because again, it's not worth moving that piece of paper around your desk all the time and thinking about it. I was thinking I was going to do it. I didn't know. Just decide I am going to do it, which is great. And then get the help, or I'm not going to do it and let it go.
I love it. I love that you gave us a deadline list.
Yeah. So just reviewing. So we talked about the business case. So you know the business case for your products and your service companies. Know your target clients. It sounds like a lot of you are already on those websites, which is great. webank.org and certified.sba.gov. You've marked your calendar for August 10th. That's your deadline for figuring out whether this is for you or not for you. And then with additional questions, if we didn't get a chance to answer them now, just text roadmap to 55444 on your phone. You'll be prompted to enter your email and you'll get a full guide that can just choose your own adventure to what's right for you.
Awesome.
And then you'll sleep easy at night. I hope you got the information you need. It's funny, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect photo. And then I was like, wait, she's sleeping in her clothes. It's not relaxing. She's not having a good night's sleep. But yeah, just rest easy knowing, okay, I know all there is to know to get started. Do you know everything there is to know about the network? No. As I mentioned, I have an 8-part course that helps people get through that. But you know what you need to do, what you need to know to make a decision, at least at this point. And here's my contact information. My contact information, my email, again, roadmap to 55444. You'll also get an email from me. So there's lots of different ways to get in touch. And if you want to talk to me, let's talk. Happy to talk about that. And if you're like, once you get certified, you really need my help, there's a whole new set of acronyms to learn, just get in touch. I'm happy to talk about it.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Liz. That was
Yeah,
fantastic. I know there was a ton of information to cover.
there's a lot.
A whole new world. Absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any other questions that came through the Q&A. So with that, on behalf of NAWBO San Diego, really, really very just thank you for your time. Just honored to
Oh my
have you,
gosh,
Liz.
thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Felina. It's always a pleasure to see you. And thanks to everyone in the chat who asked the questions and made this a really rich experience for all of us. So thanks so much.
Yes, and we will share this recording again. So we're getting lots of thank yous.
Yeah, bye.
So that's absolutely perfect. All right, enjoy your time, Liz.
Thanks. Bye, Felina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.